Okay. Yeah, nice. Okay. Alright, can everybody hear us? Testing, testing. Nice, it seems to be working. Oh, yeah, we can see ourselves. Check that out.
Nice.
Right. Send it to a feedback loop.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I think we're just gonna let it run for a bit first. We're gonna let people or the traffic build up for a little bit before we actually begin. For those of you who have tuned in early, hello guys. Welcome to the first Facebook Live AMA here with Saemin Ahn of Rakuten Ventures. Hey. And so big please to you guys to pop in a couple of questions that you'd like to ask Saemin. And it could be something regarding the industry or any burning questions that you might have, or even Saemin's favorite food. Would you want to just tell us your favorite food off the bat so we can get that question out of the way?
Look, if it's not moving, I'm gonna eat it.
Alright, yeah. So what's up with you recently? I mean, let's just begin with that first before we tackle the more industry-related questions.
Yeah, I mean, Rakuten Ventures is still chugging on. We started in about 2013 April. We were really just a small $10 million fund. Now we're a team of 4 people. 2 are in Japan, 2 including me are in Singapore. We had a crazy 2016. We invested about $67 million into startups, follow-ons plus new investments. And now we're just seeing more and more exciting companies popping up in 2017. So looking forward to it.
Nice. So far, since the beginning of 2017 to now, are there any promising verticals that you think might be the ones to watch?
I mean, for Rakuten Venture, we're looking at a couple of specific, very tech-centric verticals. We're looking at things related to automation platforms, but we're talking about, if a lot of people talked about on-demand economy, as in the gig economy, there's so many APIs available right now that you can actually aggregate all of those APIs. And for people, like for example, in the US, there's a huge employment problem in the Rust Belt, right? That's actually one of the reasons why we had some political shifting and whatnot. With those aggregation technologies, you can actually build out income brackets for these middle Americans and the lower income families. So those automation tools for developing working blocks of income, and at the same time, you have a lot of tech-centric things going around like edge computing. With IoT technology, there's so many interesting things going on, especially with the field of supercomputing, or portable supercomputing, in the aspects of how cars in 2020, you're going to have hundreds of thousands of cars pumping out, and they're going to have NVIDIA mainboards that are basically supercomputers. And think about having 20, 30,000 supercomputers running on a highway. You're going to have basically a server farm on wheels, right? So in that perspective, you're going to have really interesting stuff come out, such as bidirectional orchestration, a lot of cluster computing, cluster orchestration and whatnot. So those are going to be really interesting. Those will be kind of the really big themes that I see, at least on Rakuten Ventures side, that we want to actually participate in by the end of 2017.
Okay, wow. Alright, let's start with this question. As a market, how has Southeast Asia evolved since you started this gig?
I mean, if you look at Southeast Asia, it's kind of like, it's been kind of a really fun to watch telenova, like a soap opera. If you see on Channel 8, one of those Chinese dramas, and that it's gone through its amazing highs, it's gone through its amazing lows, and I think we're at a very interesting maturation point. And if you can think of all of that stuff, from the amazing investments done by strategic investors like SoftBank, to giant acquisitions done by guys like Alibaba, to now a lot of investors going to the pool and participating, I think definitely it's just been a huge microcosm of things to look at. You have ride sharing that have became instantly big. And the existing entrance of Uber and the new entrance of Grab, basically in the last 4 years, has been nothing but earth-shaking, ground-shaking. And things related to the gaming market is still very much burgeoning. We're looking at everyone was looking at e-commerce as the next big driver. We're actually seeing that e-commerce hasn't moved much since 2013. And now everybody's wondering, where is that aha moment? And a lot of people call it, when is the Alibaba moment coming for e-commerce for Southeast Asia? And again, people are waiting with a bated breath.
Okay. Before we dive into some questions from Facebook, I'd just like to address all the new viewers that just popped in to this live session. This is a live Facebook AMA with Saemin Ahn, managing partner of Rakuten Ventures. Hey, hi everybody. All right. So again, feel free to pop in a question in the comment section if you do have any, or if you want to just find out what Saemin's hobbies are. Just pop it in. Yeah, that would be fun. All right. Let's dive into some questions from Facebook now. Alex Robu, he says, "Hi Saemin, any future to invest in startups with focus on Myanmar? Specifically Myanmar, actually. It's interesting."
No, so Myanmar is a really interesting country. We definitely have been looking at some investment prospects there, but not necessarily in the ranges of high tech that you would see. I'm actually more interested looking at, and when I look at Rakuten Venture, yes, we brand ourselves like a venture capital company, but I see everything as fair game. In that, when I look at India, a lot of people are looking at India and saying, "Let's bring on the next e-commerce boom." We know how that's going. We say, "Let's bring on the next payment boom." But when I look at a country like India, I'm saying, how can technology disrupt, for example, the improvement of infrastructure? Because in many ways, infrastructure is a very sorely needed thing in India itself. And I see similar parallels with Myanmar. I think there's a lot more fundamental things that you can do with the existing raw resources, the exports that it has with a lot of this agricultural stock and whatnot, that could be opportune for investment. So to answer your question a little bit more briefly, yes, I'm looking at it, but more in the traditional vertical sense of looking at what can be done with agriculture, what can be done with more the fintech market, and what can be done overall with cross-border trading.
Okay. Well, let's get this out of the way. In Southeast Asia, right, for 2016, 2017, I mean, we've seen huge changes, right? Which countries, or cities in general, do you think is the most promising, is the most up and coming, and you'd probably have your scopes?
This is really interesting in terms of, I view myself a little bit more contrarian to my peers, but how you view a promising country or geo differs so much so by the fact of your style of investment. And because my style of investment is a lot more global, a lot more geo-less, I think Singapore has so much more opportunity just because of the tech concentration that this country has, a lot of the great work that the government, the EDBI is doing. So for me, I've always been keeping my eye out on the tech scene in Singapore. Especially, I'll be the one in the corner of any US demo days where they're doing the SOC stuff.
So that's a little tip. Yeah.
I'll be there with my joggers on. I'm like, what is that guy doing? So, but outside of that, I think there's always a lot of room to grow for places like Malaysia. Malaysia, in many ways, if you look at its credit card penetration to its telecommunication penetration, it has in many ways 9 out of the 10 wheels that it needs to become one of the next digital superpowers. If you look at places like Thailand, again, it's always burgeoning. So Indonesia, if you're able to solve some of the logistics issues and some of the more cultural issues behind that, now you can grow a lot more bigger and a lot more meaningful. So in many ways, Southeast Asia, each of those geographies have very, very underlying, promising opportunities. But you have to learn how to understand and know it, and what your comfort area is as an investor.
Right. So in 2016, we had what we call the financial winter, right? That the also fabled winter there, right? So for Rakuten Ventures and its portfolio startups, how did last year play out? Like, did it feel like everyone became more reserved about spending, or was there any instance of taking advantage of the cautious climate to make a larger leap forward? Like what was the risk appetite in general?
Because we have 13 companies that we've invested in over 2 or 3 continents. We have companies that have definitely taken the advantage of the environment, but also we've had companies being a lot more cautious about spending. For people who have taken advantage of the environment, it's because actually they have been cost conscious before, and now when they're aggressive about marketing, compared to their other players who've been a lot more aggressive in that perspective, they seem that's not even aggressive. They're like, oh my god, we spent so much. And then I tell them, apples to apples, you're not really spending that much. And as an investor, I'm happy because they understand that their comfort zone is not about pushing marketing dollars or sales dollars. If you look at companies who are conservative about their spending, none of the portfolios that we've invested in have been conservative about hiring the best people.
Okay.
But we've actually definitely looked at companies who don't want to spend that extra $1 million every quarter on doing Facebook advertising. Don't want to look at doing more sponsorships and whatnot on the ground. So there's always a good amount of flexibility and adaptation that goes into all our portfolio companies.
Okay. Speaking of your portfolio companies, we have a question from Facebook. Vignesh Narayanan. He says, hey Saemin, how are your ventures focused on monetization? We assume ventures meaning portfolio companies. So.
Okay. How is our portfolio company doing on monetization?
Focused on monetization.
Well, when Rakuten Venture invests in companies, we have maybe 2 or 3 key pillars that we look at when we want to invest in a company. Your company is either product first or monetization first. And on the bedrock of that, you have to be very tech-centric. Right? So if you're monetization first, if you're revenue first, we make sure that when we invest, we have an agreement with the founder where our escape velocity is for the company becoming profitable or sustainable. We've actually had a couple of companies already become self-sustainable, and in many ways they don't need to go back for funding unless it's for larger market expansions or tech expansions. At the same time, we have product-specific product-specific services that have done amazingly well with very, very lean burn. In that perspective, they don't actually need to be worrying about funding for the next 2 or 3 years. So in this perspective, at that time, once they bring up critical mass, they're able to develop a very simple monetization model that'll get them the sustainability and bring shareholder value back to their investors.
Okay, cool. I actually see a question that I think is quite interesting that follows this. Because you talk about investing in these startups, right? So this is Sunam Kachmi. He actually asks, what's this? How can we get funding on the bootstrap stage? But I actually saw the other question, which was, what do you guys see in startups that gives you all the confidence to invest in it? I mean, I've always, whenever I talk to investors, they always tell me they're trying to look for resilience in founders. Alright, so I think we get that a lot. But other than that, what do you see in startups that's like the stepping factor to say, hey, yes, that's something I want to put my money with, that's something I want to go with?
I'm a lot of times looking for focus. Like I really inherently try to stay away from startups that are trying to do everything at the same time. I'm looking for really focused investments of their time and resources to develop something that is not necessarily disruptive. If you talk about, I want to be disruptive, I want to be a startup, in the end, they're taking disruption over supplementation. Because disruption is easier to do. They're like, tabula rasa, clean slate. I don't want to deal with what's going on right now. So I'm actually looking at more core technology that is poorly supplemental to the existing industry. And that's kind of the 2 things that I really look at that gives me an extra bump in confidence to do so. Also, whiskey doesn't help. Whiskey helps because we're always stressed out because you have to understand that as investors, we're really, entrusted with the liquidity from our LPs. And you would be a very strange person if you weren't stressed out at all about handing raw liquidity to essentially ideas and code. So we're really still very much, even though we're confident enough to invest, we're still very reticent and very, very cautious in terms of how we deploy that capital.
What about founders? I mean, does founders play a big part in this? What kind of trait do you see in founders that kind of seals the deal?
I mean, it's really different for founder to founder and age group to age group. A lot of times, it ends up just being that number one, all those traits about being revenue first or product first, plus being lean, plus being tech centric. When all those stars align, it's really about, do I understand where the founder's going? Is the founder's goal points aligned with mine? I might love a brand, I might love a product that they've built out, but when I talk to the founder and I disagree fundamentally with where they're going, I might still buy or their service or their product, but I won't invest in their company because that's so important. I'm not saying that the investor knows best, that's never the case almost. But what I'm saying is that when we see in the same direction, that gives you much more confidence to invest in the company.
All right, let's head back to the questions from Facebook right now. Ellen saying, hi Saemin, what are some of your best and worst investments in 2016? Also, do you think the investment winter is over? Oh, that's a good one. And what is the current appetite for Rakuten Ventures in 2017? Wow, yeah.
Sure. You know what? My worst investment was I bought a Prime Knit Stan Smith Adidas shoe. And I'm really not wearing that a lot, and I'm really regretting it because I paid it. Never mind. I bought it on Carousel, by the way. I bought it on Carousel, but
to make the point. Yeah.
I mean, look. For us, really, I have to say that there are no worst or best investments for us because the premise, as mentioned before, is looking at the companies and investing in companies that we agree with in their path to success.
Yes.
We really haven't had, bizarrely enough, a company that did not live up to expectations,
That's fantastic.
or haven't had a company that really has done something that's the opposite of what we wanted to. If you look at actually Rakuten Ventures portfolio over the 4 years, we have zero failures. We have zero failures. We have no companies that have actually gone under. And statistically, that tells you something about Rakuten Ventures, right? So definitely, we don't have a worst or better, but we always have portfolios that could do better, that could develop a better mindset in terms of how they want to develop products. And those things we really work out very intensively during board meetings and sync-ups and catch-ups. But in this Facebook AMA, I will be committing board suicide if I said, this company is great, this company sucks. Right?
Fair enough.
But in all candor, all of my startups really kill it at their own work. Really, really
nice. Okay. So theoretically, how do you think you will deal with portfolio companies that you see are headed in the wrong, doomed, or dodgy direction?
Sure.
Stop them, advise them, or let them be and pick them up later.
So there's one thing that you have to be clear about. When a company is headed downwards or in a very bad trend or is going in a very bad way, it's never instant. It doesn't happen instantly. It is a very, very steady downward decline of either basic, inability to sell the product, or marketing it incorrectly, or putting too much cost in the different centers.
So these are signs.
These are signs. You can see it directly, right? If anyone's seen Austin Powers, if anyone's as old as me, there's a scene where Austin Powers is mowing down a person with a bulldozer, and the guy's going right? But for the bulldozer to get to the guy, it takes like 10 minutes, and it's the same thing, right? So if you see those signs, you really have to, as a board member at least, really understand why this is happening. And ideally, if you're a board member, you have the basic acumen to set things right, or to give them the right advice.
Okay.
And that's actually what you have to do. You have to advise them very strongly in terms of what's going on and why it's happening, and then try to push it in the right direction. But in the end, you have to understand that this is venture capital. If this was any more stable, you'd have to call it mutual capital or like index capital, an ETF capital or something. So in the end, you also have to realize that there is a high level of failure that has to be taken as risk.
Okay. What's your take on hand-holding? I mean, in that sense, like, in terms of hand-holding the founder, the company, in terms of like, hey, man, you guys maybe should not do it this way, and what's the Rakuten take on walking with the startups every step of the way, or?
I mean, for Rakuten Venture, for some reason, we've had a very large fortune of investing in companies who know exactly where they're going. So once we invest the money, the companies are really I can be really hands-off with the company. But in terms of being able to input my ideas and whatnot, at least for me, it started with trust. I need to get their respect. The money will never buy you respect in the startup ecosystem, especially with founders and investors. So ideally, what I try to do with every single investment that I make is I try to first earn their respect by either giving them great connections, or during board meetings or sync-ups, trying to give them very relevant feedback. If that's not the case, I will shut my mouth and make sure that I can stay out of their way as much as possible for them to do what's necessary.
Agree. Okay, before we dive into more Facebook questions, I'd like to just address you guys who've just joined us on the Facebook Live AMA. We are here live with Saemin Ahn, the managing partner of Rakuten Ventures. You guys are joining us literally live, so please get some questions into the comment section. You can ask him anything. And so feel free to just pop anything down. You can ask him about his hobbies, what he like, where he likes to chill, so you can actually stalk him and pitch to him while he's, not noticing anything. And yeah, so just pop that in. Are we still live?
I hope so.
Alright, yeah, I think it still is, it seems so. And yeah, so let's dive back into Facebook questions. Stephen Millwood. We're going to China now. Alright, lots of Chinese tech giants are now rushing into Southeast Asia. Example, Alibaba and Tencent. That's a very good one. Can we get back to the questions? Yep. Okay, is that a risk to local startups and VCs, or can the giants be beneficial in terms of opportunities for fundings, exits, and etc., etc.? So that's a very good question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm always in the school of more competition, more participation is just better for the ecosystem.
It's sort of validation.
Yeah, it's always a market validation that this place is ripe for investment and acquisition and whatnot. So I see it as a very positive kind of movement towards where we want to get to, right? A lot of people talk about how can we make Singapore or Southeast Asia the Silicon Valley of Southeast Asia or like whatever, right? But I just don't like that terminology. It's just I think for Singapore specifically, we should make it as much as Kampong Hill as it is Silicon Valley, right? So in this perspective, I think. A lot of the movement should come naturally because we're a burgeoning economy in terms of if you look at Southeast Asia as a whole, and we should always take it as a positive that money doesn't come easy, and if there's liquidity moving towards our region, we should be ready for it with good investors, good partners, good founders, and good companies.
Okay, but if I'm an early stage startup, right? Say, diving into the e-commerce space, not wise, but diving into the e-commerce space as of now. And with news on big players like Amazon looming, right? I'm an early stage startup. Should I still consider that route, or?
I think it really depends on what kind of company you want to run. Even if you're running into a highly competitive ecosystem, I can give you a really good example. We have a company that we invested in up in the US called Epic Books for Kids. It's a subscription book service, and if you were an investor and it's a subscription book service. 9 out of 10 investors would run for the hill. But the reason why I invested in this, and it's in an area where basically guys like Oyster and Amazon Books dominate, right?
Yeah.
But what this company did really intelligently is that it's an ebook subscription service, but for kids, right? And if you pay $5 a month USD, and you can have as many kid books as you want, right? And that positioning made it very unique, and now the company is basically dominant in a market that it should not be able to be dominant, despite its small size. So in many ways, positioning and being able to kind of translate that value proposition to the user very fluently is as important as your size and liquidity.
Okay, nice, thanks. All right, let's head back to some of the questions here. Abid Hussein says, what do you think the future of e-commerce in Southeast Asia is? South Asia. Specifically South Asia.
Southeast Asia. Would that be Indonesia or India? India-ish? Okay. So if I were to say what is the future of e-commerce in India, I mean, look, I don't have to tell you. There's a lot of things going on in India with even the 3 big giants. Excluding Amazon, right? You have Flipkart going through a lot of things, Snapdeal going through a lot of things, and also Shopify going through a lot of things. I think in many ways, this is another cycle, right? There was so much money and liquidity poured into the ecosystem on the expectation that there will be an Alibaba moment. There will be homogenous spend, and you would have people just pushing into the ecosystem and buying on mass, right? And this is actually one of the things that I go back to is that I think there was a lot of key pieces missing in the ecosystem, and I think people were expecting that amount of liquidity would solve those issues. Well, it turns out it really is struggling to do so even with that amount of liquidity. So in many ways, I think we have to go through a maturation and in many ways, not a death cycle, but also basically more of a rejuvenation cycle to understand what works in India, what kind of commerce works in India, and where we can actually work those things out, right? A great example is that despite B2B2C being very small in places like the US or even places like Europe, B2B2C is huge in places like Japan, Rakuten, and in places like Korea, with Winter Park and G Market, right?
Yeah.
So definitely there will be the right model for India that really develops a sustainability and a win-win for both sectors. I think we are still not there yet, and in many ways, the investors are paying the price for that, as well as the founders trying to make things work.
Yes. Okay. All right. Keep those questions incoming. We'll take a quick break or a short break from Facebook right now, so that you can actually just pop a couple of questions in. But meanwhile, let us just ask Saemin a couple of questions on our own. Saemin, you've led Rakuten Ventures for about 4 years now. Wow.
Yep.
And you've described it as a sink or swim job, right? Now, Donald Rumsfeld talks about the unknown unknowns. Okay, what are some of these unknown unknowns that you now know after spending some years in venture capital?
I owe you a beer because before we started this, we had a beer. Bet that he could do the whole thing without flubbing, but now he did.
Yeah.
So. I mean, in terms of what really was not known is a lot of times is, for example, like there was a lot of expectation about how transactions in Southeast Asia would happen post 2013. A lot of people were very much convinced that credit card penetration would not get to where it should be, like in developed markets. And a lot of people were looking at alternative payments as the method to kind of getting out and inducing people to consume more. And one of those kind of manifestations as alternative payments is carrier billing, right?
Oh, right, yes.
So, but we now know that in many ways, still cash is king. Cash is as king as you can ever think of, and it's not really going away. So I think that's one of the biggest unknowns is that what can you actually do to make the economy move at scale, maybe 2 to 4% faster, and you're understanding that the idea of technology always solving those issues may not be the issue. Actually, the biggest issue right now in Southeast Asia, and what was the unknown unknowns, will be in many ways how big is the impact of culture to the spending and to the growth of the overall startup ecosystem. And I think that plays a huge part in the actual growth of Southeast Asia. I mean, you will see right now, you have Google setting up a giant campus in Pasir Panjang, right? Now, everyone and their uncle and their chicken right now is running to see how they can get a job, right?
Right, yeah.
And that is actually also very different because now Southeast Asia culture also is a part of big Asia, right?
Yes.
And everyone wants to be secure and have a very nice job and have a great brand name, right? So then that's going to be a giant talent suck. And same way that if Amazon decides to actually put giant legs on the ground in Singapore, and same thing for Facebook to everyone else, this is going to affect the talent pool drastically, right? So I think in many ways, cultural movement and cultural understanding is something that was really unknown compared to now and compared to 2013.
Right, okay. All right, let's talk GoJet. All right, if you guys didn't know, Rakuten Ventures is an investor in GoJet. So let's start with, how is GoJet doing?
GoJet is just killing it. I mean, those guys, like every time I kind of interface with Andre, Kevin, and ADM, it's amazing what they're building on top of their platform and how they're actually developing the right kind of mix to better the overall Indonesian economy. I think in many ways they have a singular chance to really change the culture of how work gets done and things are being shipped from point A to point B. So, without being too long-winded, definitely I think GoJet are one of the ones to watch in Southeast Asia to really make an impact.
We're talking about making an impact. Let's talk a little bit about GoJet's competition, right? Grab, Uber, do you think competition, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? Can they beat out the competition in Indonesia? I mean, get a local player.
I mean, in many ways, even before we talk about, can they beat mark to mark in a specific market, you have to even understand that what does even winning mean? How long can you win for in a market where unit economics are razor thin to negative, right? So in many ways, I think each player really has to understand where their strong point is and then develop the right strategy to develop the right unit economic model to move forward.
Right.
And the one who does that correctly, and not the quickest, but the most robust set, will really be the winner in terms of developing the right mix to bring the right shareholder value back.
Okay. So let's dive back into Facebook questions for now. We have Lui Ming Hao, right? He says, you digested so many ideas, invested in ideas. You know the market movements. Why don't you start your own startup? That's a good one, yeah.
That's a really good question. For me, and I've said this multiple times in talks, I will not be starting my own startup because I'm not technical. I strongly believe that if you want to be a founder, if you want to be somebody who builds something that's scalable and something that's amazing, I strongly believe you have to have a very robust technical bent. And that's the level of expectation that I have for my founder. If I can't put that same level of expectation on myself, I think I'm doing myself injustice.
Right.
So to your question, Lou, if I were to do a startup, I'll probably join as probably a person who does maybe a little bit of product or business development or even operations. But I would not think of myself as a founder because I strongly believe a founder should be a person who's super talented technically, at least in the startup ecosystem that we live in. Because in the end, if you're like a super business guy but the product isn't made yet, you will be shuttling kopi oko sompeng every single time the engineer gets tired, okay? And then he's gonna say gaopang, right? So that's something stronger, right? Because he needs to wake up. So definitely, there's a right time for everything.
Right, okay. We have 10 minutes left, guys, so quickly get your question in. You can ask Saemin anything here on this Facebook Live AMA. Right, let's move on to another question really quickly. Ronnie Chan asks, what's your view of entrepreneurs, spin-offs from established companies? Do VCs plan to engage them in the near future?
Oh, this is a really good question because we've actually invested in entrepreneurs.
Oh, okay.
So if you know a company that's called Send Anywhere, it's a file transferring company that's based out of Korea. They're really high up in the App Store marketplace and the Google Play marketplace just because they do a lot of cool things related to file transfer from phones to other devices. That company was actually born out of a company called eSoft. eSoft was a company, if you've actually used window compression, like WinRAR, they're a Korean version of that. So they were actually Send Anywhere, which their mother company is called East Mobile. They were actually born out of an entrepreneurship. Right.
Oh, okay.
So definitely, we're very open to any good ideas that can be spun out, and we can invest additionally into it for them to help focus on their plans.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a little update. Earlier, we had a question on the future of e-commerce in South Asia. Abid Hussain was actually referring specifically to Pakistan.
Yeah. I mean, I really haven't looked at the Pakistan marketplace and whatnot. What's the future of e-commerce for Pakistan? I think in many ways we have to look at it into the same brain and the same lens as we look at markets like India and even more the frontier markets. I think you have to solve more the fundamental issues with safety, some of the political dynamics going around there. But I can just say honestly, I don't have enough context in Pakistan specifically to have an intelligent answer towards that.
Okay. Another question from Facebook. Does Rakuten Ventures invest in startups in the prototype stage?
That's another great question. I think Rakuten will do that. Rakuten Venture does do that, but it will depend on what the founder or the tech guy considers prototype. Because I'll give you another real life example. We have invested in a company in Seattle called Algorithmia. It's a marketplace for algorithms. So you can buy, sell, rent algorithms, and it's kind of like Palantir's on wheels. When they brought their idea to me, because both founders were so technical, their idea of a prototype was a full site and actually already some repository of algorithms that people can utilize.
Okay.
So their idea of a prototype was so advanced. I said, sure, I'll invest in your company. We ended up investing with the partners of Madrona, but definitely we do invest in prototypes.
So is this one of those mind-blown moments kind of thing?
Yeah. You were talking about how I add value to founders.
Right.
I'm really intimidated by the founders of Algorithmia, Kenny and Diego. You scare me because of their intelligence. I work really hard to try to gain founders' respect in that perspective.
Okay, we have a question from your colleague in Rakuten Ventures Japan. Hogildo, yes. Hey Saemin, how US federal fund rate increase will impact venture investment?
You know, he's doing this to spite me, okay? Because we had a nice meeting yesterday, and then like I teased him a lot. So okay, look, in terms of what Rakuten Venture does, there's a lot of different kind of tiers of venture capital. There's companies who have billion-dollar funds. There's companies who have $2 billion funds, and they're still considered venture capital firms. And there's companies who are basically, you know, like us, where we do maybe a sub $100 to $300 million fund.
Right.
What we have to understand is that the actual Fed hikes, the raise, or even the drops affect how LPs, the limited partners, give or disperse money and invest money into different silos.
Right.
Venture capital is actually the smallest beneficiary of LP investments. So those LPs will invest in really big ETF funds to really big hedge funds, and at the very end, they will probably disperse maybe a 1% or 2% to venture capital.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Wow.
So in this perspective, yes, Fed hikes could affect the actual activities of venture capital funds adversely if they are in the cycle of trying to raise more funds from those LPs.
Okay.
But if you're already, have committed capital and you're actually ready to actually run and invest in those companies, especially for smaller funds, we don't really care because we're such smaller movers, we're such smaller mid-cap investing companies that we're not looking to go to a $1 or $2 billion market cap company right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got a couple of questions left. Let's do this from Kwan from KK Fund. So it's very familiar names, right? Now, how do you maintain a healthy diet and fitness regimen while juggling such a busy schedule?
I don't. I'm not healthy. who has a healthy mindset or a body doing venture capital? My goodness. For me, the reason why what I can tell you is that there's maybe 2 or 3 key parts of how I try to stay in shape. Number one is trying to exercise regularly, but also by the fact that how I eat and what the psychology behind eating is. The biggest issue behind, and I do this because I actually studied to become a nutritionist, a sports nutritionist, before I got into Bluebird.
That's cool.
One thing that I can give you is, which is the biggest tip, is when you have like a big dinner,
right,
but you're still watching your weight, right?
Okay.
And you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna gain like 4 kilograms in the morning,
yeah.
next morning, right? And you wake up, you weigh yourself, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't increase my weight by 4 kilograms.
Okay.
Your mind does an amazing trick where it just forgets about all the worries and starts eating normally again, right?
Okay.
Like everyone does this because everyone who wants to lose weight is fearful of the next morning because they weigh themselves.
Ah, right, yeah.
What people have to realize is that when they actually consume calories, it takes maybe 6 to 8 hours to actually turn that fat into either muscle or actually fat. So what you want to do is if you have a very heavy dinner or a very heavy meal, I'm not sure if this is a talk about venture capital or nutrition, but if you have a very heavy meal, it's really, really important that your next maybe 2 or 3 meals, you take it light.
Okay.
So at least your body can utilize those calories that you took the night before or before meals, so that you don't actually gain excess calories and excess weight.
Right, okay.
So that's a very important step.
Interesting, yeah. You see, you don't get that with any other show. Alright, we've got a couple of questions left. Let's just finish off with these few. Now, any advice to make deal site profitable? This is from Sunan Kajmi.
When you say deal sites, is it like a Groupon site, like a flash site?
Yeah.
So one of the most important things to understand to make a deal site profitable is number one, you have to have very highly priced elastic inventory. So one of the easiest ways to make profitable deal sites is actually to do the hotel business.
Right.
Because hotel business inventory is already there. If those hotels don't sell those inventories, they actually lose money anyway, right? On that day, it's a sunk cost, right?
Yeah.
So in this perspective, the actual a lot of deal sites who are very successful or who have large sites who are successful, actually one of their biggest margin contributors are on those inventories that are highly elastic in terms of price, right? Where both sides still come out winners, despite either the provider of the inventory or the actual merchant side took a deep discount.
Right.
So definitely choosing the right verticals for your deal sites will be very, very important in developing the right profitable mix.
Okay. Alright, so We're gonna have this question from Alex Robu again. All right. This is okay. Rakuten bought Viber for 900 million at a time when Viber was losing money at 29 million and 1.5 million revenue. Yep, that's it. All right. How is Viber doing now? That's 3 years later.
I'm not corporate dev, so I think Alexandru.
Yeah.
Alexandru is referring to the fact that I actually bought Viber for Rakuten, that I executed the M&A deal. So definitely the company has been growing hand over foot in terms of how it's been growing and how engaged the community is.
Right.
I can't really talk about the finances because that's the finances of the FinOps team. But definitely the company is a really important part of Rakuten's overall strategy. As you can see, there's more and more interesting functionalities popping out of it. I think Viber just launched a secret chat service.
Yes, they did.
So I'm just saying so many bad things about my manager and whatnot, and it's just being deleted. So I'm very happy about that. So but definitely, Viber's future is as stable as it could be. If you think about the overall mark-to-market rankings of chatting platforms, if you actually exclude the WeChat family and Facebook family, Viber is the biggest.
Yes,
you cannot compare that. Think about the actual intangible worth of that platform and how many years that commands, right? So you can just tell that we really care about the future of the platform, and we're going to really make it successful, both quantitatively and qualitatively.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. All right. So you guys, we're going to cap off the Facebook questions for now. We have 2 more questions. Before we end this is from our own bank of questions, and we're going to ask you for a final piece of advice before we round off the session as well. But let's start with the question. So you're a big Quora user, right? How has your activity on the site helped you as a VC?
Oh, it's helped me immensely in so many ways because, is Quora getting money for this? I'm going to start really saying a bunch of positive stuff for Quora, but the core reason why I started using Quora is the reason why a lot of people abandon their blogs. Because if you write your blogs, you will understand the hardest part about writing a blog is asking yourselves the right question. You feel me? In terms of how do you ask yourself the right question to make a really nice answer, right?
Yes.
So in this perspective, Quora took care of that critical pain of giving myself the right question, and secondarily, in terms of making sure that I could become a more astute speaker, how I structure out my thoughts, and also developing a really good relationship with those diverse network of investors and founders. So definitely, Quora has been one of the best things that happened to me, intellectually and also network-wise.
Okay, right. Let's have a fun question now, right? Tell us a story about GoJet that we have not heard before, or just a fun and personal experience with Nadeem or the founders.
I can tell you one funny experience with Andre.
Oh, okay.
Like the CFO. I was trying to get to the GoJet office, and at that time there was a lot of tension between Bluebird, if you know Bluebird, and also GoJet, and I was traveling from the Intercon to the GoJet office, which is pretty close. I got on the car. And then I was like, I'm going here, but I didn't tell him there was a GoJet office. And then we couldn't find a place, so I'm like, it should be pretty prominent, this GoJet office. And he started saying, this is GoJet? And he started getting pretty angry.
Oh no.
So I had to get out of the car in the middle of the road, and then I almost half walked to the GoJet office, because I understand the tension the atmosphere that was developed because of those two parties, but that was one situation that was funny when I look at it in hindsight, because really the impact of the startups, the impacts that the startups have is really fundamental, and I think with the positive it brings, we also have to be very observant and very humble about the possible not so positive impact that it can bring to the community. So that was a very humbling but also very a good experience for me to have.
Oh, awesome! Nice. Wow, that's a good story. All right. So to round off the session, can we have a final piece of advice that you have for the viewers watching? What piece of advice would you give to founders? What any piece of advice that they could actually take away from this AMA session?
Sure. Guys, what I can say, and this is for all the founders I've also invested in, but at the same time, the founders who I've said no to, is it's really about developing the right kind of problem to solve. But it's great to have a personal problem to solve, but also it's important to be able to abstract yourself away from that problem and actually see
text versions